Until this point, I've been rambling quite a lot to be honest about the relevance of mixing music and image to make a more immersive experience. But all that is mainly about visual media. So what happens when you try to implement this concept on the interactive media? This may sound like I'm contradicting myself, but it may be counterproductive to just apply the same technique. Unlike visual media, video games narrative is represented through the constant interactions of three principal aspects: story, aesthetics, and interactions. The second one contains sound and image in it. Early video games mostly relied on music to distinguish the actions of the players, as when they are making progress, losing, or winning. This was a new media, so every element was treated as completely separated entities. The limited capabilities of early games made it difficult to implement music as a more relevant element. Then, the expansion of memory led to a more diverse use of music. Now, every place and character had a unique song, making the same connection cinema made between story and visuals. Nowadays, this is a common practice, especially in cutscene-driven narratives, but this does not take advantage of the player's decisions. The end result may still be amazing, but it is using 2/3 of its full potential. So how do you implement this interaction? There are some musical-driven games that answer this by making music the main focus of the interaction, but most of the time this ends up with the story being purely connected to the other two, and no one wants to buy those pieces of expensive plastic ever again. Ever. Finding a balance between music, story, and interaction is something really few series have managed to do. But there's a series that has lived a process of experimenting with this triad. I'm talking, of course, of the Legend of Zelda series, which has some really good applications on the Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, and the Wind Waker, but some purely executed ones on most recent games. Let's start with the good ones. Since the very first game, there's a high interest in the production of music on Nintendo's franchises. The main theme is an icon of video games as a whole, and the Treasure fanfare has even transcended the video game media, but those are still applications of only mechanics and aesthetics, not story. Ocarina of Time finally combines these three forces with the use of, well, the ocarina. This concept was first presented with the flute on A Link to the Past. Both are music instruments that teleport you to the main dungeon's locations, but the ocarina relevance lies in the variety of songs, the relevance of the item on the story, and how you use it through the game. Well, and the lack of a kidnapping bird. Except for Capora. Get away from me! Ah! First, Zelda's Lullaby, which is used as an emblem of your quest. Whenever something or someone questions your credentials as the hero of time, this is the key that opens those paths. Most of the time. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Darunia. Saria's and Epona's songs represent a character and also a way to receive help from them, even when you don't deserve it because you threw Saria's ocarina, you ungrateful gnome. Anyway, this makes us connect with the characters through the constant use of their songs and the utility of their respective mechanics, guidance, and transport. All the spell songs, including the Song of Time, Storms, and Sun, are just abilities, stylized as songs. The developing team could have made an item for each one and call it a good day, but they decided to make the player interact and embrace these songs, with the use of a tale behind each one, a relevance on the story, and constant repetition. The warp songs have a slightly different meaning. As I previously said, they are almost the same as the flute from A Link to the Past, so it seems useless to have multiple songs for the same action. But I think there's some brilliance in making a player distinguish each area by the interaction of the music aesthetics that surrounds each dungeon. Let's try this out. If I play this song, most of you will recognize the area I'm talking about, because you play it in the game, and it embodies its respective dungeon. All this makes a connection between gameplay, music, and places. Under the same engine, Majora's Mask makes an even more important use of music. The tone, for most of the songs, tends to be more disturbing or sad, representing the overall tone of despair and chaos in the game. An example would be the Song of Healing, and both alterations of the Song of Time, making you feel like you distorted the world in the same way you did it with the songs. Every single dungeon makes a particular piece to be a main aspect of the story, as a way to access the dungeon or something relevant inside the world for the characters. Not only that, but the instrument and its corresponding sound, accordingly to the mask you are wearing, gives some personality to each race in this world. On the Wind Waker, the use of its signature item still feels like musical composition, but the only important mechanic may be the Wind's Requiem and Command Melody that make us interact with the world. Unfortunately, like in Majora's Mask, the place song representation is minimized for a more easy navigation through the world. Still, the core concept from past games is preserved, making us recognize these songs. Everything I've been mentioning is to show there's always a focus on music in almost every Zelda game, at least for the 3D ones, but it looks like Nintendo forgot what make it relatable. The wolf singing in Twilight Princess and the harp in Skyward Sword didn't make a good use of music as interaction, being only used on special occasions and being not that compelling to play with. Seriously though, going through the world playing this harp makes Link look like a fairy coming out of a forest. Wait a minute. It seems like Breath of the Wild will not revive this trend, as now everything will be reduced to the chic iPad, which is a concept I actually like, but it saddens me that music interaction may be gone from this series. Again, I also enjoy the cinematic approach to music on video games. The one used on The Legend of Zelda needs to introduce a musical element on the story that not every narrative can implement. There are some games with little nods to this aspect, but not all are well executed. Music on video games is a whole culture on its own, and I hope the media keeps evolving its implementation through gameplay and storytelling. This has been the All-Arounder Geek, Master of Nothing, Apprentice of Everything, and remember, this is an amazing time to be alive.